I am back from maternity leave and I wanted to share the birth story and also just answer some other questions and share some other things that have been on my mind. So it's just going to be a nice chatty catch-up video. So let's start with the birth story. We had a very positive home birth, but it was very long and very intense. A home birth was actually not our original plan. We were originally thinking we would go to the birthing center, but the more that I learned about labor, I knew that I would feel my most safe and comfortable at home in my own space. And so we took the leap to do a home birth, and we had the best midwife and a very positive experience, like I said. But it was long. So from when my water broke to when she was born was 56 hours. I was not in active labor that entire time, but still it was just a lot. So my water broke at about 5 a.m. and I was 39 weeks and a few days pregnant. It was kind of a surprise to us. We called the midwife and she told us a few things to do throughout the day to sort of kickstart labor because I had no contractions. And so we did all that stuff throughout the day and I just had no contractions. Of course, I couldn't go back to sleep, so now I'm up since 5 a.m. and later that evening, contractions finally start. And for me, it did not ramp up slowly. I really didn't have contractions that I could talk through. It went from 0 to fairly intense pretty quickly. So the midwife came over and she was monitoring me and the baby because at this point, once the water breaks, then you have a risk of infection. And an infection would be a cause to go to the hospital. And so we kind of started the birth off with a little bit of that stress in the back of our head that, like, even if things are going well here at home, if there is a sign of infection, it doesn't matter, like we have to go to the hospital. And so that kind of added to the stress, but contractions picked up pretty good that night. And all throughout the night, there was no signs of infection and they were pretty strong, intense contractions. I could not talk through them. I was kind of laboring on my birth ball all night long. Like I would fold over and rock side to side during a contraction, and Nick was there with like pushing on my hips and stuff. And then I would fall back on the bed and sleep in between contractions. So things were going pretty well. And then by the morning, so about 24 hours in, my contractions completely stopped. The sun is rising and we just had a full night of this and things really start to slow. We went through the day I tried to take a nap, tried to do things to just kind of get labor going again. And we did something called the Miles circuit, which up until that point, I just felt like she was still really high and was having trouble getting lower. And so we did something called the Miles circuit, and that helped reposition the baby. And I felt so different in my body after we completed that. Like she just felt better positioned. She felt a little bit lower, and then contractions started up again that evening. So now we're about a day and a half into this thing since my water broke and gearing up for another night of contractions. The midwives were there continuing to monitor everything. Luckily, thank God, she was so strong and stable through this entire thing. I just like can't believe all that she went through for this birth as well. And she just was so stable. The contractions start up again, go basically right from nothing to very intense. And they are very steady at this point. So we're laboring, I think it started around 5 p.m. or so, and then all the way through the night. At some point in the night, I got into the tub and they were really trying to wait to put me in that until my contractions were a lot closer together. But I was just kind of needing something at that point. I needed a change of pace. And the midwife asked before I got in the tub, she's like, do you want me to check your dilation? And before the birth, I knew that that was something I didn't want. That was information that throughout the birth experience, I did not want to know how far dilated I was because I can't do anything about that number. And it's also not linear. It could take me hours and hours to get to a 5 and then an hour to get to 10. You know, it's not a linear thing. And so getting that information, I feared would really derail me and mentally just be hard to recover if I was not as far along as I'd hoped. So she did check me when I was still in the bedroom laboring before I got in the tub. And I told her, okay, just tell Nick, you know, don't tell me, you can tell Nick. And I am so glad that I did not get that number because I think I was at like a 4 or 5 or something. I was not as close as I would have wanted in that moment. Now, if I was like a 9 or something, I'm sure Nick would have told me. So I knew I wasn't that close, but I also didn't know exactly where I was and for some reason that just helped me not having that number. I did ask for the position of the baby in the pelvis because there's certain moves and things that I can do to kind of help depending on where she is in the pelvis. So anyway, I'm so glad I didn't get the dilation number because I would have been so defeated at that point because I was pretty tired. So we went into the birthing tub and things got so much more intense in the tub. Apparently, a lot of times the tub can slow down labor because it is quite relaxing, if you can even say something is relaxing during labor. But for me, my contractions actually sped up in the tub and it got really difficult in there. I was still able to try to focus on my breathing. Nick was helping me with all the breathing. He was a big part of this entire thing. Like, he was not just watching it go down, like he was very, very involved. And so we were trying to breathe through the contractions and then try to rest in between them. And after a few hours in the tub, the midwives told me, okay, you got to get out of the tub now. We got to follow this time up with a more active period. And they wanted me to go for a walk. And so at this point, the sun was rising. So this was 48 hours in, and Nick made me a protein shake, got dressed, and we went outside for a walk. I made it like a block, I think. I was having contractions and I was like holding on to Nick. And so we got back into the house. I labored around the house, just kind of like walking around from the kitchen to the bedroom. It was so hard for me to stay upright. Like, I was hanging from the pull-up bar at one point. And then we did that for a little while. And then I was able to get back into the tub. And this is where things really started to turn for me mentally. I knew going into birth that my mentality was going to be crucial, and that if I started to lose those positive thoughts and those positive, like the positive vision of what I wanted, it was going to be impossible to recover. And I was going to enter into that fear, tension, pain cycle that I was trying to avoid. And during this second time in the tub, I definitely was having a hard time mentally staying positive and thinking that I could do this. Like, it was so intense. I had like a series of positive birth affirmations that I put headphones in, and I was just trying to like focus on the positive words and the calming music. And I was having a really hard time breathing through the contractions at this point and starting to fear and anticipate the next one. So up until that point, I'd really tried to, when the contraction was over, just forget about it and try to relax in between each contraction, not worry about the next one, not anticipate it, not build up my body with stress and tension and fear. But at this point, I was struggling with that goal. And I was starting to have thoughts of like, I can't do this. Like, what's going to happen if I can't do this? That was really intense. And I remember looking up at my midwife and I was like, what are our options? Because I needed something. Like, I just couldn't stay in that tub any longer. And they gave me a couple exercises to do outside of the tub. And that was not really what I wanted to hear. I don't know what I wanted to hear in that moment, but standing up and holding and like doing these exercises during contractions was probably not it. I did a standing one where I was holding it, like Nick had to hold me up and do that for 10 contractions. And then I did some like thing laying on the couch where I was sort of twisted. Nick was like holding me up and I did 5 contractions on each side. And that was by far the most painful part of the whole experience. But after that, when I stood up, things felt so different. And I had like a pushing contraction. It was a completely different feeling than the previous ones. And I knew before birth, if I could get to the pushing part, I could do this. I was not super afraid of the pushing part because I knew I would almost be done at that point. And I know that there's so much fear around that part of labor because that's what we often see in movies and stuff. But I knew that if I got there, that was the finish line. That's what my midwife said. She was like, if you're at pushing, you're at the finish line. And when I felt that significant shift in my body, I think I got like a jolt of energy because I knew I was close and I knew I could do it. I had that inner resolve again to just like do the thing. And so there was a big shift in my energy. Before that point, I was seriously a zombie. Like I could barely open my eyes. I was just like shuffling around. It was a weird state to be in. Once I got to the pushing part, we actually moved to the bed because I was gonna take a rest. That was the plan. After those exercises, Nick was like, she just needs to rest. Can we let her lay on the bed for a little while and then we'll figure something else out? And once I got to the bed, we were just like full on into the pushing contractions. When I had the contraction, now I could push, now I could work with my body instead of trying to just like relax and breathe through the pain and do nothing. That was like harder for me than actually getting to push the baby out. Nick said that I pushed for an hour and 20 minutes, which I did not realize. Like if you asked me, I would have said that it was like 30 minutes. It didn't feel that long. We tried a few different positions. And then she was born and we got skin on skin time and she latched right away really easily. And she was just so strong through this entire birth. I still think I'm processing it. Like I think about it every day and I don't think I've fully processed the whole birth and like just what the experience, like kind of how the experience changed me, I guess. We really did advocate a lot for ourselves throughout the pregnancy and throughout the birth plan for the things that were important to us and the things that we wanted. And we just had the most supportive midwife. I trusted her completely and she was so confident and so calm. And it just was a very positive experience, which I'm so grateful for. So we can kind of move into some of the other questions that I wrote down that you've asked. One of them was actually about postpartum and how I'm doing. There's just so many things that we're learning. So the breastfeeding was pretty hard, like the first 5 or 6 weeks. I was learning, she was learning. It was messy and it's just an adjustment. I feel like a lot better with the breastfeeding now. We're in a pretty good flow with that. But initially that was hard. And then just the lack of routine, I think I kind of underestimated that aspect of things. I read a book called The First 40 Days, which I loved. It's about postpartum. And I made a ton of recipes from that book. So my freezer was pretty well stocked with meals. So that aspect of things was okay. But I think it's just the lack of routine and just so much new stuff to learn all at once. It's just an intense period, but also very rewarding and very joy-filled. And she's just so sweet and she's such a happy, chill baby. I mean, we really are getting pretty good sleep. And during the day, as long as she's not hungry, she's very happy and playful and smiling at us now. And so overall, I'm doing well. I am slowly getting back into exercise and that feels really good. Yeah, overall pretty good. And thank you so much for asking. It's just really cool to have such a strong community here that I can come back to and share all this with. So thank you so much for all your comments and all your support. Okay, I wrote down some other questions that aren't really necessarily birth related. What would you like your first adventure camping to be with the new family? I think right now our plan is to take our trailer out for a short little camping trip somewhere fairly local for a night or two. And so I think we're gonna do that come the fall when things cool down a little bit. It's been 100 degrees like every day. So we're kind of waiting for the weather to get a little bit more mild. And then I think we're gonna take the trailer out with the baby and do a nice little camping trip. I'm really looking forward to that. How do you live in the city while being such an outdoorsy person? I've been living in Salt Lake City for, I think like 12 years now. So it's been a long time. And when I first moved here, one of the things I loved about it was how close the mountains are and how easy it is to access hiking and camping while also being able to live in the city and at the time have a pretty decent job. I worked in a couple different labs throughout the years down in the city, and then I was able to kind of escape up into the mountains very easily. So yeah, I think the close proximity to the mountains, like this spot right here is just 10 minutes from the condo in the city. So it's really easy for me just to kind of get out and just be in nature. That being said, I think that has served me well for all of those years where I was also working full-time in a lab. But now that I'm working for myself and working from home, I am dying to get out of the city. Nick and I want to raise our family out of the city. We want to buy some land and have a garden, have some chickens. And so there's those dreams that we have. And I think we're kind of at the point now where we've really got to start to make some moves because I just do not want to live in the city anymore. It has grown a lot. It's a lot busier. And I think I'm just ready for a change, especially now that we have a daughter. I want her to be able to go outside and run around in the yard and stuff. And we just don't have that right now in the little condo that we're living in. So hopefully in the next year, we're going to look into moving. Again, I'd love to buy some land, but we really have to save up some money to be able to kind of make that next move. So we'll see what happens, but we're open to moving to Idaho and Montana, even Wyoming. I'd also be open to staying in Utah, but things in Utah are pretty expensive. So we might end up moving to a different Western state. How long have you been a knitter and are you self-taught? You might have seen I posted about some of my knitting. I am so obsessed with knitting. I started a few years ago, I think back in 2023, maybe 2022. No, I think early 2023, I started knitting because I wanted to make a wool sweater with those beautiful colorworks because I could wear wool outside for all the activities that I like to do outdoors. And I just thought, okay, these are really expensive to buy. Maybe I can make one. And so that was kind of how I started on my knitting journey. I got the book called Wilderness Knits by Linka. I don't know her last name, but I will link to it. It's just a beautiful book full of all of these wool sweaters. And that was kind of how I started knitting. I didn't actually start with one of those sweaters. I went to a local yarn shop. I went there for their intro to knitting class. They just had a class where they kind of taught you how to cast on and start to knit a hat. And that was how I got into knitting. And then from there, I'm pretty much self-taught. I have watched so many YouTube videos. I've rented so many books from the library on knitting. Like I just dove into it hard because at that time I was also experiencing a lot of anxiety and knitting just came into my life at the most perfect time. I feel like it helped a lot with the anxiety, just having something to do with my hands, just sitting quietly, making something. I made a hat, I think I made a headband, another hat for Nick, and then I just went and made a sweater because some advice that I got from someone at the knitting shop, one of the employees there, was you got to knit stuff that you're excited about. And I wanted to knit a sweater. So before I felt as though I had the skills for it, I just picked a pattern I like and I went for it. And I'm so glad I did that because I learned a ton. And I think when you're knitting stuff or making stuff that you're excited about, then you're actually going to be excited to sit down and do it versus if you're just kind of making something that you're not excited about, well, then you're probably not going to do it. And so I just thought that that was good advice. So now I am designing my own sweaters, and that's just like another little passion project that I am so excited about. And hopefully this fall we'll have the first pattern out for sale. So anyway, I love knitting. And yeah, I'm pretty much self-taught. What do you think you'd be doing as a job if you didn't have a YouTube channel? That is a very interesting question. I would like to say that I wouldn't still be working in a lab and like going down that pathway because it definitely wasn't something that I was super passionate about. I'd like to think that I would have pivoted a little bit, but other things that I am interested in would be pastry chef because I love to bake and I think a pastry chef could have been my other calling. I've been doing this for so long, it is hard to imagine doing anything else, but I think something in like any sort of creative field where I get to make things. And I think that's where like cooking and baking for me is very creative and hands-on and satisfying because you're making things and then you're serving food to other people. And I mean, I guess I kind of do that a lot with this job, right? Like I'm making a lot of food and recipes for other people. So I think that would be something else I would be interested in. Event planning is another thing that I think would be cool in another lifetime to just plan events. And I don't really know what kind of events, but that just always seemed like a pretty cool job. I'm sure I could think of some other things, but off the top of my head, those are the two that come to me. Yeah. Okay. How did you and Nick meet and how long have you been together? So Nick and I met back in 2017. We were in the backcountry. We both were backpacking in for that solar eclipse that came through in Wyoming, and that's where we met. And we've pretty much been dating ever since, so that's about 8 years. And now we have a little baby girl. A couple other things to talk about here. Let's talk about AI for a second because that is scaring me. There is some crazy stuff happening with AI. Like people now have avatars of themselves making YouTube videos, like their avatar makes a YouTube video. That's crazy. What do you guys think about all this AI stuff that's coming up? I feel like I'm not ready for it. I actually saw another creator, some company basically made an avatar of her and then used that to sell their product without her consent. That's scary to me, that someone could just like make me sell products that I do not endorse. So there's just a lot of stuff that is kind of scaring me with AI, and I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on it. Do you like it? Do you like seeing it on YouTube? All right, so I think that's where we're gonna wrap this up. I've been talking for a long time, gone through a full camera battery. So hopefully you enjoyed this. I'm not sure what's really coming next. I'm probably gonna be pretty inconsistent here for a little while as we're just adjusting. But I do think we're gonna try to go for a little camping trip in the fall, and I'd like to do some Dutch oven cooking for the fall as well. So that's what's coming up. And I just wanna say thank you so much for all of the kind comments and the support and the welcome back. It's just meant so much to me to have this space to come back to and have such a great community here. So I will see you in the next video.